Welcome back to Detailed, an original podcast by ARCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guests today are Ruth Wilson, Principal, and Jayden Peacock, I love his last name, Senior Associate at Architectus, with 12 offices in Australia and New Zealand. With 30 years of experience in Australia and Europe, Ruth Wilson's diverse and accomplished career has seen her manage large, complex projects and direct multidisciplinary teams towards buildings and places that exist at the forefront of innovative design. Jayden is a versatile architect and accredited Green Star professional with experience across education, public, transport, infrastructure, justice, and defense projects. A natural problem solver, he excels at leading multidisciplinary teams and distilling complex requirements into cohesive design solutions. The project we're talking about today is the Kangan Institute Health and Community Centre of Excellence in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. The Kangan Institute's new Health and Community Centre of Excellence demonstrates how architecture can do more than just house a program. It can shape civic identity and elevate undervalued fields of work. The center's design responds to the The center's design responds to the post-pandemic era of blended learning, offering students the flexibility to study in ways that suit their lives and careers. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome back to Detailed. My guests today, coming all the way from tomorrow to talk to me, are Ruth Wilson, Principal, and Jayden Peacock. I love your last name, by the way. You need to know that. Senior Associate at Architectus with 12 offices in Australia and New Zealand. Not only are they talking to me from tomorrow, they're also talking to me from spring. So they're even in a different season. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. The project we're going to talk about today is the Kangan Institute Health and Community Centre of Excellence, big long name, in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Ruth and Jayden, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
Very well. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's lovely to have you. It's evening for me and morning for you. So you're probably a little fresher and on the ball than I am. So forgive me. I like to start every episode with an icebreaker question just to get to know you a little bit and warm us up a little. And it's different every guest. I pick something basically out of a hat or something that sounds good to me. For you today, I would like you to tell me about one big risk that you have taken in your career.
Jay, you go.
I might start us off. It's a great question. And I was thinking, so I don't consider myself a big risk taker, but I ended up finding myself in a position where I was the project lead for a project back home. So I come from regional Victoria, a town called Bendigo, and a large TAFE project was being delivered there. And to be finding yourself front and center in your hometown, it's a great opportunity, but there was a lot of expectation. You know the community. And in terms of career risk, there was a huge opportunity there, but it felt like a risk for me personally. I was so invested into the project and you committed to deliver. So that's where I'm at.
Well, that's up close and personal too. In your hometown, if it doesn't quite go the way you hoped, everybody's going to know about it.
That's right. And you're not in control of everything. As much as we want to be and we think we are, you're not. And yeah.
So luckily, Jay did an amazing job on the project. And it was actually that project which kind of led the way to the current project that we're talking about. It's the same client. So
how about you, Ruth?
Yeah, well, look, I've been part of Architectus for 24 years. I've got a lot of material to work with in terms of risks. But probably the biggest risk was just after the GFC, so 2007. Things were pretty difficult in the industry across Australia, and difficult at Architectus as well. And it was actually a time when the directors of the company, and I was a director, were asked to refinance the business from, using personal funds. Um, and out of all the directors, it was only myself and our current CEO, Ray Brown, and one other director that actually agreed to do that. So it was a huge risk. It was very scary, but I can sit here now and say it was absolutely worth it, and we're very proud of what we did, and proud of the practice we've built.
I can imagine that was. I was at the same architecture firm for 22 years, and then the economy went south in 2008, and they actually had to close the firm. And I was terrified. I had been there since I was 20 years old. It's like, what am I going to do now? What am I going to be when I grow up? So it's very scary going through a time like that and hoping you're making the right decision. But clearly you did. 12 offices. Sounds like the company's doing well.
It is. Yeah. And we definitely have a business plan around, risk mitigation. So our aim is to be, have that breadth of the breadth of work that allows us to be stable in times of instability. So if one sector is a little bit quiet, that we can bolster up another sector that has the funding stream or the work available.
So a lesson learned as well.
Yeah.
For
sure.
future proofing. So let's talk about this project. I understand that this is the first stage of a major campus transformation. So let's begin with a little background on this project. What was the need? What's going on with the client?
Yeah, so our client is TAFE. So TAFE stands for Technical and Further Education. So it's a vocational stream of education in Australia. And this campus is in one of the western suburbs of Melbourne. So think of kind of, low rise, mainly residential, a town centre with buildings kind of like the 4 and 5 levels. It's very diverse socioeconomically, and lots of different cultures have come to settle there over the decades. The need for this project, or what instigated this project, was a critical shortage in professionals in what we call the caring professions. So nursing, aged care, childcare, disability care. So the projections of the deficits in those occupations are just terrifying in Australia. So there's a huge impetus to uptrain, to attract people into those occupations, train them up and get them into the workforce as quickly as possible. So that was really the first problem that this project was trying to solve. But there is a campus out there already, from probably built in the 80s. A little bit long in the tooth, as we say, needs a lot of love, time for it both to be high capacity, but also giving a better learning experience for those students. So this was the first building in that campus transformation.
We're suffering the same shortage here. That and skilled labor for like the construction trades. When, technology reared its head, and I don't know about there, but all of our schools, and I worked at a firm that designed mostly schools at the time. So I actually in real time watched it happen, started getting rid of all their auto shops and wood shops, and started putting in computer labs instead of having both, and which was great. But the problem is we still need people to build buildings, and now we have this huge shortage of skilled labor to do that. And it's right now it's getting worse every day because all the young people were being pushed to go to college, and it was kind of for a very long time kind of, you're less than if you don't go to a traditional university. If you go to a vocational school, you somehow weren't good enough. And it was a critical mistake in our country to encourage that, because not everybody's cut out for university life, and there's different paths. And so now we have a really hard time getting crews together to put our buildings together when we need to. And so now there's a big push the other direction. And all of a sudden it's a very honorable thing to go into the trades and to learn how to build. And they're being paid very well. I mean,
Yeah.
really well now. It's just interesting how that goes.
Yeah, we're seeing definitely a similar scenario over here for sure. And it's interesting thinking about those caring professions also. And I think where Jay and I ended up kind of understanding them was that it's more than a job, it's a vocation, and just what that difference is, what the motivators are to actually go into an occupation which is, altruistic in a way. It's about helping people. So that became a big driver for the way we designed the building.
Well, I'm interested to hear about that. So before you started your planning, what were the client's goals for this building?
Yeah, so they had done a business case where they set out um, the training that the facility could support in terms of, the number of hours, the number of graduates per annum. That became a business case that goes to government. They successfully secured the funding, so which is, not always easy. There's not endless funding around. So it was fantastic that they received that funding. So in Australian dollars, that was 60 million for the whole project. My maths isn't quick enough to transfer that into American dollars, but maybe around 35, 40 million American. And yeah, their mandate was to deliver this project. So when we came on board, there wasn't even a location for it on campus. We had to start from scratch and really find where the best place for this new building was, and then scale it up, work out how big it was and what it would contain in terms of training. They didn't have these offerings to a great extent on that campus, these educational offerings. So it was very much from first principles, working with our colleague, Dr. Callie Frith, who's one of the very valued members of the Architectus team, who is an education space strategist. So she goes in and works with the educators to understand how they train and how, what spaces they need to deliver their courses. So it was a very kind of from first principles type of project.
Oh, I bet that was helpful for you for the planning.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
absolutely.
I've worked with that educational planners that specialize in, helping you understand what's going to be done in that room and what kinds of things that you may need to design. Because if you haven't done a facility like that before, what do? You guess. You talk to a lot of people and you guess and hope you're getting it right.
Yeah. Well, we're very lucky that we also do a lot of hospitals at Architectus. So because it was nurse training, they do a lot of simulation, and Jay's going to take us through the details of those simulation suites. But we were then able to tap into kind of the real world and hospitals to inform our design approach for those simulation spaces.
Okay, so before we get into specific details of the design in different areas, give me a broad overall description of the scope of this project.
It's a 3-story building, just shy, around 6,500 square meters. We mentioned it's first of a master plan, so it's trying to look at the immediate needs now as well as the future needs. So it's it's always sort of intention of what it's trying to do. But inside the building, it's a mix of education facilities, which is simulations, so health simulation spaces where we might have a nursing bed, as well as your classroom spaces and all the informal and breakout spaces in between.
I know we'll get there, but I'm interested in the simulation labs because I actually worked on one time. Your project says that your project description says that this building is designed for blended learning. So can you explain in relation to design what exactly that means?
Yeah, it's sort of it's a combination of how people use the space in terms of blended learning. We've got you've got classrooms and you've got hands-on industry-based simulation learning, as well as digital technologies with VR and AR integration. So it's how all of those things work together, and it's not a one or all; it's the overlapping components of it.
I'm trying to picture VR and AR in a
Yeah,
health lab.
well, it's interesting. So I guess we've got one space that is um, got a big digital backdrop. So if you picture being able to set up a scenario and be able to change the audio around the space and the backdrop in, so you can pretend that you're in a hospital with all the noise and the chaos that's happening through there. And then you take it to the other end, and you've got these digital um, tables that dissect the body, and you've got this body in a digital table, and you can sort of move the cut plane through it, and you can change how it looks. So there's a huge array of technologies that's been implemented into this project, and it changes how students can learn and what they can do within the TAFE.
Okay, I have to ask, and I'm going to sound like an idiot, and I'm sorry, but when you say body, like are we talking a 3D image? Are we talking a robot? Are we talking a human? What kind of
So,
body is this?
so if you picture so it's a table that is a screen. So a horizontal surface, a screen down, and there is a digital human body that lies in there, and you can move the visual plane through the body. So it sort of cuts and dissects it, and you can change the layers through that. So you can turn it on so it's only showing the vascular system and the bones, and you can play around with it in many different ways. But it's hyper realistic. It's not a cartoon simulation. It feels like it looks like a body.
I
So
think
my
it is actually taken from proper imagery, isn't it?
It probably is.
Because,
Sorry.
for those of us who's learned anatomy, with the plastic, perfect kind of innards of a person, and then to see what it actually looks like with all these fat layers and everything squashed up
uh,
against each other.
uh, I'm just all that keeps popping in my head is the modern version of the old Operation game. Did you put the little tweezers in and took the pieces out? It's been a long day. So, especially here where I'm at on the west coast of the United States, sustainability is big everywhere, but we're crazy on the west coast. It's huge. Were there any sustainability goals for this project?
There was, and it's one that this client is really driving in their future work. So this project was a big milestone for them, where this project is targeting a 5-star Green Star certification, formal certification, and this is the first of any of their projects that is set to achieve that. But it's using natural materials, so it feels welcoming. It's approachable. As well as how it integrates with the landscape, sort of views outside. It's the intangible things that is sort of socially sustainable and how you move through and how you use the space. And it goes back to the building fabric as well, sheltering from the north, from the hot sun. We're down south. The connection down to the town park adjacent to this building too. It's sort of wrapped into the whole thing, but. 5-star certification is sort of looking at a national benchmark for Green Star.
I find it interesting how differently any kind of medical facility is being designed these days. I've done a number of interviews on different hospitals, things like that, and things I haven't worked on a hospital in quite some time, things like lavender rooms for the
Haven't heard of.
nurses to go and decompress. And I did one just recently, a hospital in Canada that was in an area with a large Indigenous population. And they put in burning rooms because they do these burning ceremonies.
Mm.
And they wanted to create a hospital where this community would want to go, and it would embrace them and the way that they live. And it just amazes me. I think COVID really turned a corner for medical facilities. All the stress and the hours and the everything everybody had to go through during that time. They realized they didn't have some of these things they really needed for their medical professionals and for their patients. Serenity gardens outside. It's just crazy what people are doing.
Yeah, well, it's that whole belief that, space and place impacts, the human condition. So you're gonna work better if you're in a supportive environment, and you're gonna heal better if you're in a, healing environment. So I know our health team is deeply, entrenched in that thinking. I think for this building, the way that we thought about the cohorts right at the beginning, we did a lot of, we took time to understand, the different cultures that people would be coming from. So there's a large Middle Eastern cohort, and that has played out in some, very, very tangible and practical ways, around the way we've organized the bathrooms, for example, which are a bit like, I always call it like, the Qantas Club. Qantas is our national airline. So it's, you go into a cubicle and you have your own hand basin, and you're completely, enclosed acoustically and, just to yourself within your bathroom cubicle. That, for example, I think has been really well received by the quite diverse cohort that studies there now.
That's a new one I've seen, usually they're just individual bathrooms, but and we're doing a lot of restrooms in the United States where you have the floor to ceiling walls
Mm-hmm.
and it's private, but you still come out of that room to wash your hands.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's not an actual basin in the stall
Yeah. Yeah.
to wash your hands. So that one's new to me. See, I'm learning something new already. So you already brought this up, and I was glad you did because it's one of my questions. So site constraints. You said that there was not a defined place for where this building was going to go. And I love talking about challenges on a project. So what did you have to work with on this site? And did it pose challenges? How did you figure out where to put the building? Or does it have like tons of room?
No, there are always challenges. Yeah, so it's quite a large sprawling campus, but there's not a lot of big pockets of space. Where this and I mentioned it before that this was a first of a ambitious master plan, so this was stage 2 and 3 yet to come. So there was discussions on where this should go, and we ended up landing on sort of almost like a new front door to the building, but then this isn't the entry or the admin building. So it's quite a prominent location so that they can advocate the new campus, advocate for new work, and it addresses the future orientation of the campus. So that's really the tension that it always had early days with where does it go? How does it orientate? How do people interact with it? And how does it interact with the existing campus versus a new campus that we want to go through? So yeah, there was very robust conversations early on debating all of these. And then we're sitting right next to the town park, which the campus never integrated with. It was quite a separate thing. You had quite It wasn't large, but it was quite dense, garden, sort of bush space in between that was fenced. And there was conversation about how does the campus give back to the community? How is it approachable? How can we bring an element of passive surveillance to the area? How can we increase that experience? So then the conversation opened up, well, maybe we need to do work on the town park. So then that conversation grew and the project grew. We had to put money aside, but all of this is happening in a project that is government funded, that had a set dollar, the 60 million that Ruth mentioned before, that could not budge. We had a time frame that was committed that could not budge, and you've got a client and ourselves, and we're all trying to, this highly aspirational project that is trying to attract people into this desperate need of employment and skill training. So it's trying to do a lot, and so there's plenty of challenges through there to make that all sing together and not miss any one of those beats.
So what'd you end up with on this site? Were you able to find a way to interact with that park?
We did,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
That's one of the, huge successes of the project. So there's no longer a fence. You flow from the park to the new building.
And one of the key decision points of that is, how does this happen? Because I guess the funding is for the TAFE on their land. That's what they're doing. The town park and the garden and everything, separating the two, is on council's land, which is typically funded by council projects. But getting all the bodies together, we ended up funding that work through the project, so coming out of our budget. And then we worked through with council about how that needs to work. And the council have plans on how that park is developing over time, which they're doing in incremental steps. So we had to work with that. And, it ended up being a real success. But, that didn't come without a lot of work and a lot of discussions early on. But it had to be done early so that we can make sure that that money was set aside and those ambitions were realized. If it came late in the project, it would have been a different story. But addressing these things early was the key.
Well, I imagine that making that decision early also probably affected, how you were going to orient the building. I mean, I'm sure the students love that this park is accessible now, but if you're wanting to tie it to this facility and to this site, I would think you would need to know that prior to you really deciding your overall footprint and design of the building.
So the park is on the south side of our building, and over here, that's our shady side. So we're able to have a really highly transparent building through that connection. So our building faces the park, the landscape blends through. The idea of lighting and passive surveillance is something that just comes naturally through that. And we're able to, with building orientation, turn and protect the building from the north. So the building and the park, they speak to each other, and then the master plan grows across that through this axis that builds upon that connection between public park and TAFE campus.
So do you think the building design would have been different if the whole park thing didn't happen? Do you think that the overall design would have been a different design?
Yeah, for sure. It would have
Yeah.
been such a lost opportunity, actually, just thinking about it. Yeah.
And we always respond to context too. So there would have been some other constraint or some other opportunity that we'd be responding to, and the building would be different.
So I read in either my trolling of your project, because I go beyond what you send me, or in your project description, that this project has a hand-laid brick facade with detailing inspired by local creeks and ultrasound imagery. I've seen the pictures, and when our listeners go on the website, they'll see the pictures. But tell me what that means and describe that for me, because it's
Ye
pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Um, I guess at Architectus, look, we always work with, honest intrinsic materials. So we're not the architects that build something and then clad it with something else. So we want the materials we use to be self-finished, to be, highly durable, to be, intrinsically beautiful. And we think brick is one of those incredible products that, looks good 30 years later, good as the day it was laid. And in this part of Melbourne, there is a significant brick building, which is the council chambers. So there was a kind of a precedent for a kind of a civic quality to brick. And on the flip side of that, there's a lot of low quality building stock around this part of Melbourne, which is more, your kind of aluminium cladding and, materials that degrade very quickly. So we were keen to give this building a civic quality, and we chose bricks, and we were able to, prioritize that in the cost planning that we could afford them. But it's a big building. It's very big. And one of the things we do with our TAFE work is really think about, we call it the long life loose fit. So we think about creating a structural grid that can adapt over time. So we generally end up with quite rectilinear buildings because of that. It is just inherently the most functional grid. So we started massing up the project, and it was feeling quite bulky and big. And we did window, put our punched openings, windows, the south facade that Jay was talking about, but we still felt that it could cope with another layer of something happening in the building. And we looked for inspiration from our context, as Jay said. There is an actual waterway through this suburb, which the suburb has turned its back on. So we wanted to bring that back to light. And this is also part of. So we were consulting with First Nations traditional elders. So in Australia, we call that designing with country, and they were keen to surface the natural attributes of this area, so the things that would have been here before, before white man, basically. So the waterway would have been the thing that would have been crucial to the original traditional owners. So we thought, as a starting point, that could be something we'd explore in pattern making. And then it was actually a designer on our team, Kimberly Pakshong, who took that, and she did this incredible work using digital tools and Rhino to map different patterns. And then as it evolved, we actually realized that it was saying lots of different things. I mean, for me, it looked exactly like the ultrasound of my shoulder when after a ski accident, And then I looked at another part and thought, it could almost be like a, 10-week pregnancy scan. It just has this kind of feeling of medical imagery as well. And then we thought, it still looks like water. It looks like something flowing. So that whole idea of life is coming through in the pattern making. And Jay, I don't know if you want to talk about how then the contractors kind of took that and made it happen.
Yeah, which was a whole piece of work where, we're doing detailed elevations of the brick themselves. The way we did that was we set up a grid system across the building, because the pattern was all modeled in 3D through the Rhino scripts, and we were able to color code. So then we had bricks that were stepped out a certain distance, were a color, and then went across. And we're able to do a grid where we can go on site and check and count bricks to make sure the patterning, nothing sort of slipped a run or two. So there was this due diligence across the board, and early days with the contractor, we sat down with, this is how we're documenting. Are you okay with that? And their preference was for the color coding. They didn't want a dimension set out thing. It's like, well, people can see the colors. We know what the color means, and it was a much more streamlined way of communicating where everything goes. And you can sit back, you can look at the colored elevation in front of the building, go, yep, that's marrying up.
I was wondering what the contractors thought of that the first time they saw it. I know contractors just love difficult brick patterns. That was
Look,
sarcasm.
no, they were on board with this one, and I think with everyone sat back as this developed, and everyone was very proud with how this turned out.
So, besides the brick, I happen to work for a building enclosure consultant. So, I'm always interested a little extra in the enclosure of the building and the wall assemblies and how you make it a nice, tight, energy efficient building. So, besides the brick, tell me about the exterior shape, which you talked about a little bit, and the design of the building skin and the roof and some of the materials you chose.
Yeah, I can kick us off, Jane. You can
Jump
bring
in.
in some detail. So really, it was deep in this theme of honest materials. So we used concrete as a structural system, and that is also visible on the outside of the building and in the colonnade. So the colonnade, which is in the area between the building and the park, is a really key feature of the project. That's the way you enter the site and the building. So a really generous covered way where students can gather and gives shelter from the sun in summer and rain in other seasons. So the concrete is exposed, and once again, contractors who were Hutchinson Builders did an incredible job of the concrete. And then the window assemblies are a kind of a terracotta kind of color, a little bit metallic, but that is an applied finish. That is a powder coat, and you'll see on the images they are kind of shaped windows that give a sense of depth in the facade. And importantly, on the ground floor, there's a lot of glass. So we wanted people to walk past and understand what was happening in the project. And this ties back to that early intent of attracting new people to this field of study. So on the campus, so I think almost every TAFE in Australia does adult migrant English program, which is for people new to Australia to come and get some English skills. And what the TAFE has found is that it's sometimes that cohort, just by being exposed to what else is happening on the campus, that sparks their curiosity about studying something further once they finish their English language program. And so we were keen to grab hold of that. So we knew that if we organised our building so that those students were actually walking past the windows and looking into the windows, seeing those incredible things that we just talked about, the layered augmented reality kind of person. There's also a lot of physical models, the kind of simulation models you see in health training. And just interesting. So you're walking past classrooms, you're seeing people your age kind of in there doing interesting things. And from what we've heard, it's really worked. So their enrollments are really, really strong, much stronger than they actually mapped. So it's a so far the theory is working.
I'd walk by just to snoop and see what they're doing because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Did you
I
want to
might
add on to that, Jayden?
I might just add on. So I guess the transparency of the glass was an interesting one. It was a big desire for us to make the south as transparent as possible. So with our engineering team, we conducted full glazing calcs across the building so that we can map with the mechanical systems that's going through here to enable a very transparent glass with a more tinted glass to the north for protection. And the scale of the windows do change from the north, so we've got more protected windows still providing the daylight into the spaces, and what spaces we had adjacent to north facades changed too. They were more the simulation spaces, where you're working at the task at hand, and then classroom spaces that are where you might find yourself, um, just looking out the window a little bit. They're what's overlooking the garden or the town park. The the window for the building facade itself through the Green Star needed to meet an airtightness rating and testing. I don't have the figures in front of us, but it was real industry leading standards that the airtight testing came back at, and that came through a really robust collaboration between us and the contractor about getting the insulation right, the air tightness, all the taping right, and the detailing between the 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 concrete hobs at the end of the edge with the steel coming in above, how the brickwork sat with it, and making sure that everything could be taped down and finished correctly. I hadn't gone through the air tightness process before, but it is a detailed one. It is a nervous one because you put all this work in, they bring the machine out, they're running the numbers. But we can follow that up if you want that information. But it was well above the Green Star standard that we're trying to achieve.
That's the conversations that I hear all day, every day in my office, because that's, their whole world. Let's move inside the building. So give me just a broad description of the different types of spaces inside this building.
So they do vary a bit. Everything's educational and collaborative, but we have what we call a simulation. We have multiple simulation space, and they're all slightly different. But if you pictured a hospital ward where you might have a number of beds in a single area, so we've got a nursing simulation space which has 8 beds, and that replicates and represents a hospital ward. And each one of those beds has all the equipment in the bed head behind, including they don't have all the gases, but we do have oxygen that gets pumped through. So they can press all the buttons, they can act in an emergency. It is set up like you're in a hospital. We've also got a pathology lab. So this is another simulation space where they've got chairs where they take blood from mannequins, they take blood from themselves, they practice doing needles. Um, we've got another simulation space which is sort of this they've got high fidelity models in there where a instructor would be in the control room, and they set up a scenario where the mannequin can talk through, they can vomit, they can do all sorts of things, and the rest of the class is sitting adjacent to them with screens, digital connection into it, but also a one-way glass screen. So people are watching, they're assessing each other as they go through these simulations, and some of these simulations can be terrifying. They're going through life and death situations. So these really detailed simulation spaces. We have our classroom spaces, which is your more typical. We've got loose, flexible furniture that can be moved around in multiple different ways, but we've got a screen up the front, a teacher that would be directing and working through the space. We've also got a double story or two level multi-purpose gallery space, and it's got a retractable seating that can come out, and they can have large gatherings there, and it can be pulled away for this fully adaptable multi-purpose space. And that has a curtain that can wrap around, and then a full VR um, virtual reality backdrop and screen and projectors come down and can display on this screen, which can provide the ability to run scenarios and to be able to run scenarios that could be mimicking sort of quite a dangerous or a stressful environment, something that they can't do in a physical environment, but they can really test the limits of what can be done on campus. And then we have our staff rooms that a big part of the brief was to have real attractive staff facilities so that staff want to come and work, and there are so many staff that are on the existing campus that have migrated into this building because of its facilities, which is quite funny, and they're really nice to hear. Um, and then there's all the circulation and breakout, and so not a lot of the circulation that we've got in is habitable. So uh, we've got furnishings that we say in a more active breakout center where people might be moving past, but then we've also got breakout and study spaces right at the top of the building that overlook the park that are really quiet and passive. So there's sort of that mixture of social and focused study.
So, talking about this technology, I've also it was after the 2008 economic crash in the United States when my firm closed. I actually went to work for one of our consultants for a couple of years. Well, actually 6.5 years. And it was an MEP consultant. So I joke because I've worked in construction, architecture, MEP, and building science. So I tell everybody I crossed to the dark side, but I won't tell anybody which one's the dark side. So, technology in this building, there is clearly a lot of very super high tech facets to this project. I can't even begin to imagine what the MEP engineering and design look like. This is not your normal building. So tell me about that a little bit. Because as the architects, you have to coordinate all of that. They want room for all their stuff. Um, Give me some more details about that.
Yeah, and I guess the extra layer to that across all these spaces, each of the spaces have, whether it's a classroom or a simulation space, they've got cameras and microphones that can record but also stream, so that if you missed class one day, or if you're wanted to reflect back on a simulation you did earlier in the day or earlier in the week or months ago prior to an exam, you can look up and you can watch and you can have playback. But yeah, you mentioned it. It's not an easy feat, and we worked with consultants, ACOM, across this project, and it's about establishing the brief because it gets quite technical very quickly. So trying to understand the core functional requirements. What are those expectations that we're all any layman is trying to get out of the building at the end of the day, trying to record that, and then it's actually managing it through the process because from the original briefing to opening the facility, years go past, and people working in the engineering firms change, people working on client side changes, and so it's controlling that information, and also the technology changes really quickly. So it's managing that change, managing those expectations throughout the control. That's where we found the most time was spent was actually you're coordinating with controlling, but also just keeping an eye on it and making sure, because this we didn't touch on it, but this was procured as a design and construct procurement system. So we were novated under the contractor to deliver the building. So the documents were only produced to a certain percentage, and then we completed the documentation under or with the contractor. Um, so then that's where there was sort of performance criteria, and then actually working it through with the contractor and with the client's IT team as well to manage those expectations. So it was complex.
I'm just curious with that much technology in one building. All buildings have a lot of technology these days, but not like that. Did it affect your building design to have enough room to hide all the wires and the pipes and the ducts and all the things, the fake gas lines that are actually spitting out oxygen? Um, did you have to have like wider wall cavities or?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a really good question because we did a lot of prep in terms of understanding, I guess, the floor to floor build up, what needs to go through there. But the one thing that did sort of unravel that we had to work through with the contractor on site was some of the cable lengths and just making sure that the data specification was so the data gets there's certain lengths that we have to be between to be able to keep a level of data control and to maintain data speeds. And realizing that once you sort of articulate around all the structural moves, so there was, I guess, the original design response where it was all working. So we had to be adaptable, but luckily with and just the way we designed the building, that there was the ability to move some things around in terms of the grid structure. We knew that everything was fitting. We knew what bits we could touch. So we were able to I guess shape the building as that detail came through.
I saw a product once. I actually got to tour their plant in the United States, and I'm drawing a blank on the name at the moment. I'll think of it though. But they make this grid floor system. So they're almost like these metal cubes that go in the floor, and then your flooring goes on top of that. So you can run all this cabling and all these different things underneath your floor. But at any time, you could pull up the carpet and pull out just one section to get to something without having to rip open walls or, do things like that. And I don't know at the end of the day how well it works when all is said and done, but I found it to be really fascinating because you could pretty much put almost everything in the floor and access it from just one cube. It was a really interesting thing. So keep that in the back of your head if you ever need it.
Yeah.
And
We've definitely
you're
done
taking
those kind of plenum floors before. Not so compatible with wet areas. So most of these simulation spaces are kind of mop down, hard flooring type spaces. So, but there's also kind of a language that we use around exposed surfaces. And if you see some imagery of the project, you'll see some exposed surfaces. I mean, you can see in the backdrops for both Jayden and myself, our in studio has exposed surfaces. So that's also a way of being able to get to things pretty quickly, pretty effectively.
So there was a mention in your description, and forgive me if I butcher this and don't say it right. The 3 belangs. Am I close?
Yeah, well done.
Well, thank you. That was a wild guess. So this artwork by First Nations artist Auntie Kim Wandin
Wondered.
and Christine Joy. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I might kick us off and Ruth add in if you as needed. But look, how the client works with First Nations is quite impressive, and there was always an aspiration about getting some local arts in the area. So early days, we knew something was going to happen, and we designed the entry atrium to be able to walk into the building. You can see where you've got to go. You can read the building. You know that there's 3 levels. You know the stairs there, the lifts there. You understand. You can get your bearings. But this idea that there is some art that is welcoming and greeting you into this space. So as the project progressed, Arnie Kim and Christine Joy joined the team, and we started talking and working through what this could be. And what we landed with wasn't the first idea and wasn't the first thing. There was even prototypes of other pieces of art that went in the space, and we all just honestly looked at each other and go, "It's not quite meeting expectations." But as this one developed, it took on some real meaning, and it's really got some traction. And we worked with them so they took ownership. They're the artists of the blanks and the sculpture, and so there was a design intent there that they were working through, and we helped them with scale and proportions and how we could hang them, and it was the colors that were being proposed for it were colours of the orca in Australia over here, and so that's sort of connecting with the earth and the country that we've got. But we showed them what it was looking like in this space, and then that influenced some of the color decisions and some of the nuances and how we're going to shape this. So, um,
Joe, you might
yeah, they
describe
did
what
a
a
great
belang
job.
is, probably for
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's
Um,
okay. That was going to be my next question
uh,
anyway.
uh, uh, yeah, thank you. The belang is a woven basket that um, that was used as sort of a primary source of gathering um, prior to white settlement, and something that through our First Nations consultation was something that sort of came to do where it represented health and well-being, and it was the object that brought life and food and um, for around. So it's a woven structure. So then we worked with, well, how are we going to deliver sort of these large, oversized woven structures that are meeting building regulations that are doing what it needs to do and are quite aspirational or engulfing. But we end up working with a manufacturer that used um, laser cut timber edgings that sort of wove in amongst themselves, and there's only just pin connections between each one, and they're just meticulously sort of clicked together, and it forms this beautiful object which we hung from the ceiling. And there's three of them that situated in different orientations, so that you get different glimpses out them from the boardroom or from the entry. And you walk in, and there's a skylight that sits in between, so you can walk in and you can look up and connect with sky country, and the three belongings are floating in amongst them. And as you move up the building, you experience them up close. So the stair brings you really close to one where you can almost touch it, and then you can appreciate them from back. So there was a lot of work and sort of working through the scale and the orientation, but it was a really really nice collaboration.
I love that. There's something about weavings that are notable in a lot of different cultures. I was gifted a couple of woven mats from a family that my boy's Boy Scout troop had helped, who had just um, immigrated to the United States, and they gave me these two mats. And the meaning behind the mats were, if you're given one of these, you are like a permanent member of the family. You are always welcome in their home. And I still have those mats. I probably got those mats 25 years ago, and they're very beautiful. And I love the meaning and the personal touch of things like that when it gets incorporated into a project. It brings up a personal relationship to the building that you might not have otherwise. Um, so I had to ask about that when I saw it. It's like, I want to know the story. So tell me in more detail, pick one or two or as many as you like of the more really unique interior spaces in this building. Like, what's your favorite?
Um, we've talked a lot about the simulation, which is there's a lot to love about those spaces. But what I really like is we've managed to sort of fold the circulation, or how you move through the building at each level in slightly different orientations. And up right up on the top level, we've pulled the circulation down so that it runs past the southern facade that overlooks the town park, and it's provided this passageway that you actually got to go and find, and that's where we've got more focused booth study areas. So it's this really nice spot where you can sit down, do your work, you can study, but you've got this really nice sheltered view over the park, and that's what I love. And it's this idea of exploration that we talk about in the plan, and you look around in the model, but then seeing it delivered and go, okay, I'm walking through this building. There's a lot going on here. It's really interactive. And you get up here and so you could breathe. Yeah, I'm relaxed. Look at this view. I could sit down here and I could do some work. And it's like you found a little haven up the top.
How
Yeah,
about
I think
you, Ruth?
I was going to say, I think that one of the best spaces for me is the triple height atrium. So we've gathered the circulation and vertical circulation around a linear atrium, and we've kept that idea of learning on display within that. So you can stand on the bottom and you can look up into the simulation suites and you can see interesting things happening. You can see people circulating. So it feels very lively and connected, and you feel part of something bigger. And it's everything, there's the students learning childcare, there's a little simulated creche, with the tiny furniture, and then the people learning aged care, there's actually, a whole aged care unit, but with half height walls. So it's like you're kind of walking in a floor plan in a way, but they use all the actual spatial conditions to practice, getting someone out of a bed, getting them into the shower. So all of that is on display, and it makes it a very vibrant feel inside the building. I think that's the thing that impresses me most.
So before I ask about the interior finishes, this has been popping in my head the whole interview, so I'm just going to ask it. So I'm famous for surprising you with questions. Have either one of you actually participated in a simulation?
Not yet.
Oh, come
Um,
on.
Yeah, the bleeding chairs get me. I like to stay away from that. I like the needles, but yeah, would love to participate in seeing especially the high fidelity models. I think that would be really interesting just to sit and watch
Mm,
how that occurs.
yeah.
So early days, we went and looked at other facilities to benchmark. We saw some of those operate, but yet to see this one in action, unfortunately.
My youngest son's girlfriend, who will eventually be my daughter-in-law, is becoming a PA, a physician's assistant right now. And so before she started her rotations while she was still in school, she had to do quite a few hands-on things. And they lived in Boston at the time. And if I happened to be visiting, I got to be a part of the simulation.
Oh.
Yeah. They said, if you have a needle, get away from me. But my poor son got to be a part of a lot of her assignments. But it was really interesting to watch. And so I was curious if anybody thought, let me try it out. Let me see what it feels like.
Yeah. You feel like you're part of the simulation. So you're walking through the building and there's 8 mannequins lying down. You feel like they're watching you. And so
Yeah.
it's quite an eerie thing, but they're quite sort of uncanny. And you touch them, they feel like flesh, and you move them around. The eyes are very realistic. It's
I bet you the students have some fun with that.
they
I'm not
would.
even going to
They would.
guess how, but
Yeah.
I bet you they have some fun with that.
And in the aged care setting too, they've got because they've got different mannequins for different situations, and they've got um, toy animals and those kinds of things. Like there's just a lot of things. So you're never quite sure what you're going to turn around and see. So it's it's always surprising.
Do they give them names?
They do name them.
Okay.
Yeah, they're people. They're people. It's
So if I come to Australia, will you take me to see this place?
Of course.
Okay.
absolutely.
It's very high on my bucket list of places to visit. So let's talk about interior finishes a little bit. What is the aesthetic that you wanted to achieve in this project? And tell me just about some of the materials and finishes you chose throughout the building.
Mm. Look, I think the interior strategy came back to our overall strategy of how do we attract people into these occupations, and back to that conversation about how special a vocation is. So I think where Jay and I ended up was actually saying, okay, that someone who has actually had that vocation awoken in them, that is such a special thing, and let's show them how valuable it is by giving them a place to learn and work together that in one hand takes it very seriously, but in the other hand just supports them and is a beautiful place to be in. So we've used a lot of natural timber. We've worked really hard on the acoustics, so it's a fantastic acoustic environment. It's still lively, but you can always have a private conversation and not be overwhelmed with circulation noise. So our interior designer, Zoe Tesla Taylor, had a strong theme of portals. So each time you enter one of these simulation suites, you feel like you're entering through a portal. So there's kind of like a celebration that you're leaving a circulation space, going into a very special place. And they're framed in some stained plywood. So still a timber material. You can still see it's timber, but it has a different color. And the colors are also broadly aligned with the discipline type that they're teaching. So there's a bit of a subtle wayfinding layer to it as well. But walking through the building, it feels light-filled. It feels serene, which was definitely how we wanted it. We wanted it to feel not like a school and not like a university. So it doesn't have, it's a serious space, I'd say, in a way, but it doesn't have that kind of very kind of institutional academic feel that a university might have either. So to me, it feels light and uplifting, which was what we were aiming for.
I would guess you also had to have, because a lot of times you have to worry, having surfaces that are easy to clean, and disinfect and things like that. So I'm sure that probably played into some of the finished choices as well. I'm assuming they don't only work on robot people here, that they actually do experiments on real humans as well. I don't know if
Occasionally.
experiments is the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's an interesting comment because it's something that, we work through quite a bit with, I guess, how soft the building should be and finding the balance between materials that are highly durable and highly cleanable, and just making sure the building didn't feel stark because we wanted it to feel approachable. What Ruth was talking about, we were welcoming. We wanted to make sure people wanted to be there. So it's really finding that balance, which we did with some careful choice of linoleum and some cleanable surface, but getting the color right so that it's not too stark or too bright or anything like that. And then we got to think through the lighting and making sure the glare's not reflecting too much and all of that.
I know it's always been one of my biggest complaints about hospitals is that they're just such sterile environments.
Yeah.
And it's really in older hospitals, probably the only peaceful place you can find in the whole hospital, if they have one, is the chapel. But people are designing hospitals differently, and they're looking for all these different ways to make them. You're stressed out now. Nobody's happy in a hospital. Unless you're having a baby, nobody's happy in a hospital. Okay, so maybe some people might not even be happy about that, but yet, I think it's so important because it's a place where people need that extra piece. And I understand this is an educational facility; it's not a hospital, but I would think that having a warm, inviting space would make those special people, and they are special people that choose to go into these professions, all that more comfortable and excited about learning. And also show them what it can look like as they move forward in their careers and hopefully influence that in other places.
Yeah, absolutely.
So construction always comes with its challenges. Tell me about the construction phase of this project and share with me one construction challenge that you faced and how you solved it.
Um, as we mentioned before, it's a defined budget, so there was no moving on the budget, and it's the construction phase. This was a design and construct procurement, so we prepared the documentation to it was 70% complete. That went out to market. A contractor was selected. We were then novated under the contractor. So we then completed the construction phase as the contractor being our client. And so there was challenges all through that because on the contractor side, they're trying to find efficiencies. They're trying to deliver the building. They're contracted to do X, Y, and Z. Um, and they've allowed for what they have in their tender process. And there's some constructability details that we need to work through and go through and all of that. Um, one aspect of that where I guess documentation being a percentage complete is we had some tensile wires that were up in the building, and we documented that they were there and they needed to meet X criteria, and that was the fall protection from the upper level. Uh, and there was structural steel above that was scoped, but how they all work together, there was a lot of complexities around that, where, they ended up resolving in some extra steel being put in to support that, and that was because of the actual installation of the tensile wires where they can't tense them all up at the same time, they actually do them individually. So as you do that, the structure can potentially warp up and about. So you're having these conversations with the contractor about how can we how can we resolve the intent within the constraints that they're contracted to deliver. And they have to deliver the tensile wires and the fall protection, and they've got a dollar value that they have to work within. And we're working as a team, and we all, through all of our D&C processes, it has to be, and it really should be, a collaborative um, response. And this one really was. And there's plenty of examples of that where the architect and the builder are working together to actually solve this. And we're all sitting back at the end of the day going, yeah, really proud of what we're doing. And through that process, we do need to be mindful that the contractor has needs that they need to meet. And if we're out there being a hindrance to all of that, then you're missing the opportunities to actually, you know, do things more efficiently, find opportunities within the project. But building a relationship early with the contractor enables just opportunities to go through, and you learn a lot from the contractors on site if you can get a good relationship as well.
I was thinking that.
Yeah.
So before we get to our two closing questions that we give everybody, just quickly tell me, what is Architectus working on that I get to call you about later and say, hey, will you come back and talk to me about this one?
Yes. Well, we've thought of two projects to let you know about. So the first is the University of New South Wales Health Translation Hub. So this is up in Sydney. I was lucky enough to go and do a site walk of it a couple of weeks ago. An incredible project, $600 million project. So 10 times the budget of our project. And it sits in a university precinct, but also a health precinct. So it physically links to hospitals. And interestingly, it's also has a very interesting development model where it is funded with development partners, not by the university itself. And it's an incredible project that it brings together clinicians, research, and education in a beautiful environment where collaboration will lead to advancements in health. So that's a very exciting one. And the other one, sticking to the theme of health, is back down here in Victoria. one of our outer suburbs, Frankston, rapidly growing area of Melbourne. In January, we're opening a new hospital, which was $1.1 billion development, huge development. We did this in partnership with Architects Bates Smart, and we've had a team working on that for many, many years, and it's absolutely thrilling to see it come to fruition. Incredible project that will make a real difference to the communities down that side of our big bay, which Melbourne's on a huge bay. So I think there's 130 more beds, spaces for mental health, 15 new operating theatres. So really setting up for that growing community.
How satisfying it must be when you work on a project for years to finally see.
Incredible.
It's also like your kid moving out of the house.
It is.
You have to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. So please follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram, and you'll see a lot of information about those two projects coming to light towards the end of this year and beginning of next year.
I will, and so will my listeners, but I will because I'll be calling you again. Jayden and Ruth, I can't thank you enough for stepping a whole however many hours, 24 hours into the past to talk to me today about this wonderful project and all that you're doing. I honestly, sincerely hope you'll come back and talk to me again about another project. I'd love to have you back.
Absolutely.
My door is open. You don't need an invitation. Just call me. Hey, Cherise, I got a great project. Thank you again so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.